Ukraine's most famous general has accused America of destroying the world order after Donald Trump cut supplies of arms, intelligence, and now appears to be threatening to deport up to 250,000 Ukrainian refugees from the United States. The Kremlin is euphoric, and it responded last night with a ballistic missile strike on a hotel in President Zelensky's hometown. My name is Jerome Starkey. I'm the defense editor of The Sun newspaper, and this is Frontline, your weekly roundup of the most important news and analysis from the war in Ukraine. And once again, what a week it has been. We're starting with the comments from General Vladimir Zaluzhnyi, who used a speech at Chatham House in London, where he is Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, to warn that America was destroying the world order. Significant for two reasons. One, because he echoes what many in Ukraine and many of Ukraine's allies fear is happening, and significant for a second reason as well, because Zaluzhnyi has long been tipped as a possible successor to Zelensky, and this clear criticism of America will be seen as him positioning himself at the moment behind Zelensky and behind Ukraine. General Zaluzhnyi is wildly popular here in Ukraine because he is seen as the Iron General. He was the man who was in charge of Ukraine's armed forces for the defense of Kyiv 3 years ago, when it was under that ferocious onslaught in the first few days of the Russian invasion. He was the commander of Ukraine's armed forces when Ukraine rolled back Russian forces from Kharkiv. He was in charge as well when Russian forces were forced to retreat from Kherson. So significant intervention from him. Why? Well, let's look at what America has done, specifically what Donald Trump has ordered to be done since our last update. He has cut arms supplies with immediate effect to Ukraine. Now, what does that mean? Ukraine can probably fight on for between 2 months to 6 months, depending on whose estimates you listen to. The weapons that they will run low on first are the most valuable top-end American weapons, most notably things like Patriot missiles, which it uses for its air defenses, which defend places like this, Maidan Square in central Kyiv. Other weapons, of course, Ukraine's other allies will lean in, are already leaning in, and Ukraine has massively ramped up its own domestic production, particularly of things like artillery shells, dumb munitions, and drones. But nonetheless, America provides a lot of very high-end, niche and specialist, advanced, high-tech military capabilities, all of which Ukraine relies on. After that, Donald Trump then ordered the CIA and his intelligence agencies to stop sharing American intelligence. A massive blow, another massive blow. What will this mean? Well, the most obvious effect is likely to dent Ukraine's missile early warning systems, which it uses to warn people when Russian airstrikes are incoming. That system relies on a complex combination of radars, but also satellite intelligence from the United States. The United States spy satellites monitor the world. They can detect missile launches. If Ukraine is starved of that information, it will make its early warning system less effective. It will put civilian lives at risk. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that people will die as a result. And just today, the latest development reports coming out of America that Donald Trump has ordered officials to look at ways of revoking the legal status of some 230,000 Ukrainian refugees who fled this country after the full-scale invasion and have taken sanctuary in America. What is Donald Trump doing? Well, it's clear he's trying to use every lever at his disposal to put pressure on Ukraine. Why? Well, as he says, because he wants to end the war. And what else does he want? He wants to secure this minerals deal with Kyiv, with President Zelensky, the deal that Zelensky didn't sign after that disastrous White House visit last week. Is this pressure working? Well, in one sense, absolutely yes. We've seen after President Zelensky left America, he was greeted in London, feted by Prime Minister Keir Starmer and a number of European leaders and the Prime Minister of Canada, where those countries discussed ways that they could help Ukraine. But after that, Zelensky did publish a conciliatory tweet, if you like, which Trump later referred to as a letter, in which he clearly said that he was willing to work under Donald Trump's leadership towards a just and lasting peace. But lasting peace is important because that's where Ukraine and America, that's where the sort of clear water, the difference in their positions appears to be. Everything Ukraine is focused on is trying to make a peace deal last, and for that they want security guarantees. Donald Trump seems far more focused on speed, wanting to end the war immediately. Now, I've said before, no sane person, and certainly no person who's seen the carnage and the suffering and felt the fear up close, as I have again this week here in Ukraine, no sane person wants this war to last a second longer than it has to. But how this war ends matters as well, because that will affect the security of Europe, that will affect the lessons that other countries around the world take, notably China, but also, of course, all those other countries which might be caught in the middle between autocracy and democracy, between choosing whether or not they want to align with, for example, Beijing or Moscow or Europe and the West. In one sense, though, this pressure is working. Zelensky has made those conciliatory sounds towards Washington. By all accounts, the minerals deal has been agreed. It's just a question now of when it's signed, although after last week's episode, I'm very cautious of making predictions because it is so topsy-turvy, so hard to predict the whims of the man in the White House. And of course, on another level, all this pressure that Donald Trump is exerting is not working, because actually we've spent time on or very near the front lines, particularly around Pokrovsk and in northeastern Donetsk as well, where Russian forces continue their sort of daily meat grinder assaults against Ukraine's forces. We've spoken to medics in field hospitals, in the stabilization points, the first place that wounded Ukrainian soldiers go to if they're wounded on the battlefield. And in fact, when we were there, one of the surgeons we spoke to said, should we wear suits? He was knuckle deep in human gore. He'd been saving a man's life, and yet playing on his mind was that extraordinary criticism of Zelensky when he was in the Oval Office that he wasn't wearing a business suit. And we've seen lots of memes across Ukraine of people sharing pictures of dead bodies with the question, should we be wearing suits? It's grim gallows humour, and it sort of thinly veils the fury that many people feel here about the way America has been treating them. And in the other sense, is the pressure working? No, well, because for Ukrainian soldiers on the front line, whilst of course they're paying attention, they can't ignore what's happening in Washington, nor can they stop fighting, nor can they down tools. They're fighting the war day in, day out. They're holding the lines, or they're supporting those soldiers that are. So in that sense, whilst so much changes, at the same time, nothing changes as well. A quick roundup of what's been happening on the battlefield. Well, of course, I mentioned that ballistic missile strike on a hotel in Kryvyi Rih last night, where at least 3 people have died and dozens have been injured. That appears to be Russia's response to all this talk that Putin wants peace. The missile strikes continue, civilians continuing to be killed, and symbolic perhaps because Kryvyi Rih is President Zelensky's hometown. In Kursk, in Russia's Kursk Oblast, there are reports that Ukrainian forces there are really under mounting pressure. You remember Ukraine captured this patch of sovereign Russian territory in August, and they've been clinging on ever since, but under mounting Russian pressure. That's where Russia deployed North Korean forces as well to help them reclaim it. The latest update is that Ukrainian forces who are trying to get into Kursk are coming under intense attack from airstrikes, potentially glide bombs, but also these FPV drones, Russian Lancet loitering munitions, which have been very effective throughout the war. Russia attacking Ukraine's supply lines, making it harder to resupply those forces in Kursk. Attacking supply lines, clearly something that both sides have been doing increasingly, especially as the drone technology has evolved. We've continued to see Ukrainian strikes deep inside Russian territory on oil refineries, most recently at Ufa. We've also seen suggestions of Ukrainian advances around Toretsk, particularly around Toretsk in eastern Donbass, where Ukrainian forces appear to be moving either side of the town, potentially with a view to surrounding it, cutting it off in the near future. Other things worth mentioning this week: extraordinary footage appeared to show 2 Ukrainian soldiers using a beehive to flush Russian soldiers out of a cellar or a bunker. The suggestion is that these soldiers had run out of, the Ukrainian soldiers had run out of grenades, and so using some extraordinary ingenuity took a beehive off its stand and dropped it into the entrance of the cellar, the bees then swarming, flushing the Russian soldiers out. We've seen the Ukrainian Navy taking out a Shahed drone over Odessa. Other refineries on fire in Russia. There's one in Ryazan in the Samara region, and another, the Chertkovo refinery in the Rostov region. Again, all part of that Ukrainian attempt to degrade Russia's ability to prosecute this conflict. As ever, thank you very much for your questions. If you do have any, please do ask them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can next time, and if I can't, I'll get into the comments as well and answer them there. First question: what does President Trump think about Russia receiving military support from Iran, North Korea and others in exchange for money and possible missile technology? Well, short answer is he hasn't really commented on it. And in one of the most disturbing twists of the last 10 days, we've seen America vote with Iran, Russia and North Korea at the United Nations. The axis that Russia has formed is one of the is of great concern to Ukraine and its allies, but doesn't seem to be something that is troubling the White House, or certainly doesn't seem to be something troubling Donald Trump. The man clearly very mercurial, hard to predict. There are those who are theorising he has a grand and greater plan, but he does not appear, or hasn't at this stage, expressed any concern over that relationship between Russia and those other countries. Question number 2. Can Ukraine successfully continue the fight against Russia without US support, relying on support from Europe alone? Can it continue? Yes, probably. Will it be able to defend itself as well or as thoroughly? Absolutely not. American aid is substantial, both in scale and substantial in terms of technology, the advanced technology that America can provide. Things like the ATACMS missile, Ukraine's longest range ground-launched missile. But one of the messages I've heard again and again this week from Ukrainians is they've been starved of support before. I mean, most recently, from their point of view, they were starved of American aid from the autumn of 2023 into the spring, summer of 2024. And that was because US Congress, Republicans in the US Congress, blocked President Joe Biden's attempts to pass a bill that would send billions, about $50 billion of US aid to Ukraine. And that had real impacts. They felt a shell shortage on the front lines. Russia exploited that, was able to make significant advances. I think that's probably why we saw things like the fall of Avdiivka. But the front lines didn't collapse, and that's the message that Ukrainians keep stressing. They don't want to fight without American support, but in extremis, that is something they may have to do. Question number 3, final question today, is why are NATO countries hesitant to wage a full-scale war on Putin without America? Well, it's not just NATO countries. America, all of Ukraine's allies are wary of waging a full-scale war. Nobody wants this conflict to escalate into World War III. And I think if that question is asking why are European countries or NATO countries wary of supporting Ukraine without America, well, that's simply because America is the behemoth. It's the most powerful country in the NATO alliance. America's spending on defence, its total spending on defence is nearly $1 trillion. That's more than double than the rest of NATO members combined. But those countries, Britain and France, who are prepared to put troops on the ground here in Ukraine to support or guarantee a peace deal, if a peace deal happens, have said they want American security guarantees. But that doesn't mean they won't support Ukraine if America stops. Clearly, the hope in Ukraine and the hope among Ukraine's allies is that America can be convinced to keep helping Ukraine. It is in Ukraine's interest, Europe's interest, but most obviously and importantly for the White House, it's in America's long-term interests as well. If you've got any questions, do ask them in the comments below. And as ever, thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you next time.